Hey, welcome once again to Street Level America USA Heartbeat, classroomusa.net, and OperationEaglesWings.com. There's a number of different platforms that we monitor and we produce content for. And a lot of times we'll produce a show and it'll go up on multiple platforms. Today we're talking once again to James Roberson. Now, he's written a book. Hopefully, we can show it here. Uh, the It's called Buck Sergeant Roberson, Thailand, 1967, 1968, and um, we'll put a placard up about the book before the
Well,
show.
let me throw mine up again and see if
Excellent, thank you, sir.
that won't work. Let me see which is the best way here. It takes me a second to get oriented, but
Hold it up a little bit higher. There we go. And the thing I absolutely love about this book is he writes about his experiences in Thailand, 1967, 1968. One of the things I absolutely love about this book is he he, he lists names, plane numbers, exactly what was going on. And I think it's really important that we honor those brave men who sacrificed their lives in Thailand. And I think this book does a real good job of saying on this date, this mission went out, this plane returned, it was flown by this. James, you put a lot of effort into this book.
yes, I did. It took me a while. It took me quite a few years to get around to doing it. Uh, I began to realize that maybe a few other people might appreciate some of the information that was in there, but it's one of those things that you almost wait too long to do. My um, wing commander Robin Oles waited too long to do his, and his oldest daughter had to do the book for him after he died. So I
Mm.
thought I'd at least try to beat that.
Well, you've beaten that, so you do appreciate that. You've got to have you already, or you have another book coming up, or you've already
Yeah.
published another
Now,
book.
I already have the other book was actually done first. Uh, its title is not a military title. Can I hold it up also?
Please go ahead.
Okay. At Hey, get this thing up here again. Get it squared away.
Just says James Roy Roberson, Roberson.
Can you read the subtitle?
What does that say? Read it for us.
It's created in 1945, born in 1946. And
Okay.
that's a significant subtitle, and we can get around to that anytime you want to. But it's James Roy Roberson, created in 1945, born in 1946.
Explain that subtitle now while we're talking about it.
My mother and father both worked on the Manhattan Project in Oak Ridge, and which was making material for the atomic bomb that was dropped on Japan. Two of them were dropped on Japan in August of 1945. My mother and father were actually celebrating the dropping of the bomb and the end to the war, and that's how I was created. So I really was created in August 1945 as, of all things, to get recognized for dropping of the bomb. But of course, the bomb was a horrible thing in a lot of ways, but it saved several million lives, American lives at least. And anyway, that's what the subtitle means. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to bring this book to your podcast is there's the previous book was all about Thailand, and that was pretty much it. This book actually has 5 chapters of my entire Air Force service. Now that's not the whole book, so you don't have to worry about it being that long. But those 5 chapters do describe how I got into the Air Force and the different things that happened to me after I got into the Air Force. And I thought, now, most veterans, people that's been through the service, some of that stuff's not going to be all that interesting, maybe. But I thought maybe some of their families, some of their uh, kids might want to read, and sometime, especially for some that they didn't get a chance to talk to their fathers who were in the service, that at least this way they might have a little bit of an idea of what it was like to go through boot camp and all the way through the progression of their entire service. So that was my reasoning for, because I know we're primarily focusing on the veterans, and I wanted to explain why a non-military looking book might still have something in there that might be of some interest to them. But I did have I told you before, I had
Mhm.
some unusual things that's happened to me in my life, and one of them, of course, was being born on the post in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, behind the barbed wire fences and the machine gun towers. No, I don't remember seeing those, but people have described it to me and told me that this is what happened. I was actually delivered by a Marine Corps captain, and he probably didn't know he was delivering a future Air Force brat. But anyway, it was interesting start for me. But one of the things tied to that, my mother was a nuclear operator, helped
Yeah.
centrifuge a lot of the material to make the bomb. And as a result, in those days, we didn't have the safety kind of things. It turned out that I wound up being the middle of six, what would have been six miscarriages because she was exposed to all this low level radiation. There was three
Mhm.
miscarriages, then I was born, then there were three more miscarriages. Now, somebody, and I give God the credit for that, I am very, very lucky to even be here. But what is even more interesting is I wound up spending the first 2 or 3 weeks quarantined in the hospital. Some of the kids actually died from an infection, but again, I didn't die. I made it through, and but my mother being a nuclear operator, well, later on, remember I mentioned in the previous interview that I worked on nuclear loaded B-52s, those
Mhm.
that were on the alert pad. Well, that was kind of an interesting connection
Yeah,
there.
it is.
Well, later on, after I got out of the service, I, I actually went through the nuclear operator program for the USTVA and worked at Sequoia Nuclear Plant as a nuclear operator, just like my mother had many, many, many years ago. So I got off to an interesting start, and and there was this common connection of nuclear. And of course, you keep hearing people talk about nuclear, in relation to Iran and stuff now. And and I already told you about actually seeing the Shah of Iran in person. So,
Mhm.
but I did think that that was somewhat interesting. Maybe not to a lot of people. It was very interesting to me to find out about it later about my precarious start, I guess, if you would say that. And there was a couple other things that happened even in Thailand that where I had a really close call and and I did mention that somebody was obviously looking after me. And I wasn't in active combat, but I had some situations, many of them over the years. And in fact, uh, my uh, wife's daughter-in-law read my books, and she asked me when she finished the book, she called me up and she said, James, how is it that you're still alive? Well, I said, by the grace of God, I guess. But anyway, I did want to mention that. I did want to mention the fact that the book does have uh, some interesting stuff about my other military service other than in Thailand, and that's the reason I wanted to show that one book.
It's interesting that you had your start was in the nuclear part of the military, and you continued. It's just an irony that that's how you served in the Air Force. Your mom was active in that, and then you began to serve in that as well as you got into the Air Force. One of the things that we wanted to talk about was the compensation and some of the challenges veterans are having with compensation these days. And in your words, some of the um, inequalities, some of the challenges that servicemen are having in getting the compensation. Uh, you wanted to talk about that at this on this show, so let's go into that. What are some of the problems that we're having with military members getting their just compensation?
Well, part of it is, of course, one of the real big drivers was Agent Orange, the pesticide exposure and stuff. And for a lot of us that wasn't actually on the ground in Vietnam, they denied for 50 something years. It was only a couple of years ago they finally agreed that yes, we probably were exposed to Agent Orange. Well, we pretty much knew that. And and they only recently saw all of these years have gone by that we really couldn't claim that we had been exposed. Well, now they say, yeah, you were, so you can claim it, but you don't get to go back for past years and collect any kind of compensation. So that was a problem for quite a few of us because there was a lot of me over several years. It was actually millions of guys that were in these other areas other than directly on the ground in Vietnam. But now that as far as some of the other inequities, I run across Vietnam veterans all the time. Of course, one of the first things that a lot of them want to compare is do you get any disability? and and how much? Well, and what's your issues? What's your physical or different illnesses that you have? Your medical issues? Well, I've run across several people that have identically the same diagnose medical issues that I have. And one of the things that um, is interesting. They tell me that they're getting 100% compensation. They are getting 100% disability, so they get 100% compensation. Well, I've got the same thing they do, but I only get 30% compensation. Now, I don't get 30%. 30% disability only gives me 14% of 100% uh, dollar amount. So I'm not really that upset about it, but I'm not the only one. I run across people, and when you compare them, and of course it depends on, I guess, who's reviewing and the people that do the now. In all fairness, I want to be sure everybody I've ever dealt with at the VA, both in person or over the phone, all of their contractors, they use medical contractors to evaluate you. They're always very polite. They're always very respectful. They always thank you for your service. And I appreciate that. There's no question about that. And some of them will tell you, whether they're a nurse practitioner or a registered nurse or whoever's doing this test or whatever, they'll say, now I don't get to make the decision. Well, I understand that. And so I don't hold it against them. But uh, you got different people making different um, decisions on different individuals. And even though the cases are almost identical, the resulting award is not the same. But
So you're gonna have two people with, in your mind, the same problem from the same exposure getting different compensation from the U.S. government. So in the mind of the serviceman, hey, this isn't fair. Is that what you're seeing?
yeah, and and you think, well, and when you talk about over several years, even small amounts. Now, for example, when I got 30% disability, that's the lowest you can get and get any compensation. And you get 14% of what the guys that got 100%. I know that sounds weird to say that, but that's really the way it's prorated. It's on a curve, and so that is one of the things that does concern me. And I don't blame any one individual. I don't think that it's deliberate or whatever. You just got different individuals with different backgrounds
Mhm.
making the decision. Uh, but that is one of the issues that the veteran uh, uh, does face when he applies. Now, there's another issue too. If you have your own insurance, you can't use your insurance and the VA both for medical care. And but they will tell you, okay, we're going to let you see our doctors and stuff. And of course, if you're my age, you've also got Medicare, the but they're letting that they will let you have this um, the use of the VA and seeing their doctors and getting medicines and stuff from them, but you can't switch back and forth. You got to use one or the other, but at the same time, they tell you don't cancel your insurance. Well, you're paying for something that you're not using. Now, for me personally, because I'm also on Medicare,
Mhm.
I just I go ahead and pretty much use my own insurance. And there's another issue too. It has to do with, and I understand this was intentional. If you on some benefits or some ability to even see the doctors, and under certain, unless you're the only reason I could qualify to see the doctors, the VA doctors, is because that I was exposed to Agent Orange. When they finally said, okay, you were exposed to Agent Orange, now you can see our doctors instead of seeing your own. Well, that seems like uh, what's the big deal about that, except if I hadn't qualified for exposure to Agent Orange, I didn't qualify because of my income level. Well, I understand, if some people can't afford it or whatever, but if I'm sacrificing or I'm working and I'm paying my insurance, uh, but then I'm not eligible. So in certain circumstances, I wouldn't even be eligible if until they agreed that I was. And the first time when I first applied, they said they forgot to check the box of where I was stationed. So it wasn't exposed to Agent Orange. Well, they said you're denied, and I said, what am I denied on? Well, you're denied on income level. You make too much money. Well, I didn't think I was making much money at all, but apparently it's above. I have no idea what the amount is, but evidently I make more than that. But once
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Number one, back in Thailand or Vietnam, when you were first being exposed to Agent Orange, I've heard a number of instances of servicemen. They were just spraying this orange stuff all over the place. It was covering planes, uniforms, supplies. They just spread it all over the place. When you saw this stuff falling from the sky and looking at it in your skin and brushing it off, did you guys have any idea that, hey, this might not be a bad this may not be a good idea? did you really know when that was happening, uh, the ramifications, disastrous ramifications health wise? Or was it just one of those things like, oh, well, just dust it off and move on?
Well, for me, it wasn't one of those exposures from airplanes. It
Hmm.
was our barracks was next to the back fence. Our
Okay.
security fence. Well, they sprayed this with herbicides, you know, applicators, guys on the ground, and stuff
Hmm.
with, and but it just so happened the barracks that we slept in had screen wire walls. The entire walls were screen wire. Well, guess what? Don't think some of that didn't come through? Well, we really didn't think that much about it at the time because now we weren't exposed to the point like some guys would need raincoats or something like that. So
Hmm.
up until many years later, when you start developing certain problems. Now, I was from a family of seven. I was the middle child. Remember, I was the middle of the
Hmm.
miscarriages. Well, I was the middle child of all the living children, and but my older brother and one brother 2 years younger than me, we were all in the service, and we were in either Vietnam or Thailand. We
Hmm.
developed certain medical issues. Well, my two youngest brothers were not in the service, did not get exposed, got the same DNA. Guess what? They didn't have any of those issues. So it was
Okay.
kind of obvious that something happened to us over there. And and it, I never really, I just kind of accepted it pretty much. And then uh, a couple of years ago, my brother sent me a an, an email with an attachment to it that showed, hey, we're finally admitting, yes, you were exposed to Agent Orange. And so I went down and applied and went through this. Now, all in all, I think the VA does a pretty good job, really. And I don't want to be overly critical. In fact, I met some really nice people, some dedicated people, but there was other issues that came up. For example, I had a 4 year enlistment, and when
Hmm.
they started cutting back in 1969, when they started letting a lot of us that made staff sergeant, because our salary had gone up, they offered us an early out. I was offered a 7 month early out, and allowed. Uh, I was only given 30 minutes to make my decision, which was a mistake. I told you I hated that I ever got out, but
Yeah.
the deadline was with 30 minutes to go, and but when I was exiting, you go through all the different medical exams and all this kind of
Right.
stuff. They determined that I'd lost. Remember, and I worked on around jet aircraft, and I
Right.
lost hearing
Sure.
at the low end and the high end. I saw the graph, and they told me about it. But they said, if you make a claim, you're not getting this early out. Well, I had a wife that was pregnant, and I
Sure.
was facing another overseas deal, and I'd done spent a whole year away from her. So I, I took the early out, and
Hmm.
because I didn't want her to be alone when the baby was born. So I took the
Sure.
early out. Well, when I went through all of this testing here recently, you know, uh,
Right.
it'd been almost a year when I started doing all this different tests. They told me that they couldn't find that test. Everything's been digitized now. It's on the computer.
Sure.
They can actually pull it up while they're talking to you and stuff. And they said, well, there's no record of you having that test, but they said you are required they are required to give you this test before you get out of the service, whether early out or whatever. And I,
Hmm.
and so they said there's no record of it. I said, well, I know they did the test. I saw the graph and everything. Well, it obviously didn't get transcribed into
Digital.
the electronic database. And well,
So
that
what did they do?
I didn't get any compensation
Wow.
for it because now they was trying to be the people doing the test and said, well, since they don't have a record and you're saying it is, it's you say, they say, they'll probably give you the benefit of the doubt. Well, they didn't, but again, it's no, I'm not completely deaf, but but I wanted to, but it's those kind of things uh, really doesn't seem quite fair, and you
No, it
can't
doesn't.
really blame any one individual or hold anybody uh, accountable. But of course, one of the biggest issues, Dave, is a
Mhm.
lot of this stuff, like the exposure, Dave, to Agent Orange. If we had known about it long time ago, some of us could have possibly gotten some kind of medical attention earlier on that might have been of some benefit to us. So holding off, uh, they've actually held off long enough that quite a few guys are not even here anymore to make a claim. So, and now when I put in and made some claims for some of my medical issues, there was two or three other things they didn't have a record of it. Well, they said you didn't make a claim. Well, it wasn't a matter of making a claim. I was seeing a doctor. They actually
Mhm.
did surgery on me. Well, but we don't have a record of them doing any surgery on you, and that kind of thing. Now, overall, uh, it's not that big a deal, and I do not begrudge not one single guy. I do not begrudge him um, getting uh, whether any compensation or 100% or whatever. To me, some of the guys deserve whatever they can get. It's only
Right.
they went through a lot, but
That brings up another point I want to talk about. There's several points I want to talk about. Number one, I've talked to a lot of veterans that really, how do I say this? I hate to use the word enjoy, but they enjoyed serving their country. And most veterans, when I ask, would you do it all over again, they would say absolutely, because they loved, they felt duty bound to serve their country. And I'm not going to say every single veteran I've talked to has that view, but almost all of them do. Still having that view, even when, how shall we say, not treated what we call equitably or fairly by the Veterans Administration as far as claims. So it's just amazing to me that it is just another way the veterans have stood up, answered the call, literally sacrificed for their country. Some some gave some, and some gave all, is what they say. But some veterans, like yourself, continuing to sacrifice for America by enduring the injuries and the disabilities that you received while on duty station in Thailand or Vietnam, and just continue to say things like, "Hey, I do it all over again." That is character, and you're to be saluted for it, as other veterans are that served in Vietnam and Thailand. Um,
well, if
Thoughts about that?
you remember the last time on our last interview, I told you that I wasn't drafted, that I volunteered. I even volunteered in writing for Vietnam, and and people asked me if I would do it again, and I said, "Yeah, I'm from the volunteer state. Of course I would, and yes, even though I'm identifying, because this is one thing we had mentioned before we had ever even done the first interview. We
Hmm.
we were going to talk about some of the issues that the veterans were having, and so
Right.
the but even though we've had all of those, and the circumstances are, yes, I would have done it again. And I thought it was important. I thought what I uh, was doing uh, was absolutely something that was kind of expected, that I felt my family expected me to. Now, they never told me that. I thought I kind of expected that from myself. I
Mhm.
just thought I want that on my record that I did my part, and and I did it, and I'm still glad that I did it. But one of the things that I
Mhm.
would suggest
Go ahead.
to guys that's having a problem, they have what they call VSOs, Veteran Service Officers. You know all about them probably.
Oh yeah.
Well, I would suggest if a guy is really bothered about it, or if he thinks it's worth his time, that he probably ought to go see maybe a different veteran service officer and see if they could help him can reapply. Now, I know a lot of guys that have got their compensation increased by appealing it or uh,
Mhm.
refusing to accept what I haven't felt strong enough about mine. My biggest thing was I just wanted to know that they had acknowledged the fact that I had been exposed and that it could cause some of these problems. Now, there's another issue too, Dave.
Mhm. Go ahead.
Several There were several things that I had put in a claim on that they agreed that I had the problem, but they said, but you had to make a claim at the time you were in the service, or you had to make the claim within a certain amount of time after having exited the service, which was usually a fairly short period of time,
Mhm.
sometimes even less than a year or whatever. Well, you got the problem, but you didn't apply for way back then. Well, I would have thought seeing a doctor and being treated or having surgery, that I would have thought that would be making a claim. I mean, to me, no, I didn't fill out some special form or whatever. But those kind of little things, and I know you've heard the thing about
Sure.
Catch 22
Oh yeah.
from the movie Catch 22. Well, there's all these little Catch 22s. Yeah, you were exposed, and but I don't want to beat that subject to death, but I did want to point out that some guys kind of got shortchanged because of a lot of those little catch 22s, you know. So, uh, but that was one of the things we uh, had talked about. Uh,
So I guess one of the advice that you would give to people that may have not liked the compensation or the results they got from appealing, possibly look for another VSO because not pointing blame or saying one person is better than another. Quite frankly, as in all occupations, there are some VSOs that are probably better than others. And if you're not satisfied with the claim you've got, maybe you should look for another VSO. Is that what we're saying?
yeah, and
Okay.
I'm not saying you need to get mad or uh, uh, take it out personally on anybody, or whatever. But if you feel that strongly about it, if some of these things might have happened to you, you might want to flag it to somebody that can appeal it. I do know that some people apparently. I know some guys that have appealed more than once, and every time they appealed, they got a little bit of an increase. it the squeaking wheel gets the grease kind of thing. But no, I did want uh, to tell the guys though, you know, as much as possible, don't take it personal. Your your service is still appreciated. I'm pretty sure that I was appreciated. I talked about before about some of the sergeants and the my ranking sergeants, because I was a sergeant at one point, and my commanding officer. They put it in writing what they thought about me, and I was talking to my three younger brothers on one occasion, and I was talking to him about this, and made the statement. I said, I waited all my life for somebody to think that well of me. And one of my brothers said, "You waited all your life." He said, "How old were you?" I said, 21. That sounded kind of silly all my life, but but at the time, being 21 seemed like a long time.
It's all in perspective.
But anyway, I did want to just kind of flag uh, those kind of things that has happened. There was even some um, uh, records of some guys that were lost in a big fire out in the,
Mhm.
I can't remember if it was Kansas or wherever, but it was one of the military records storage areas, and they were lost before they got transferred to the electronic stuff. So
And
anyway,
some records were lost on the tarmac in Vietnam because they were so covered with Agent Orange, they just destroyed the records.
yeah, it really amazed me though that they went all of those years. For me, it was 60 years. No, you weren't exposed. No, you weren't exposed. No, you weren't exposed. And then, oh yeah, we agree you were exposed. But well, 60 years has gone by. Might have had a lot of different procedures. Might have been able to mitigate some of the consequences a little bit. But anyway,
So
I
as you overall look at the situation, has how especially the Thailand and Vietnam veterans have your unique situation of that, especially Agent Orange aspect of it, has that improved? Are they doing a better job now than they had been, let's say, immediately post, late '60s, early '70s?
Oh yeah, I think there was probably millions of us that was exposed to Agent Orange that they said no, we weren't. Well, no, you weren't. Well, now they're not arguing that anymore. They'll if you can document that you were stationed at a certain place, they'll say we presume that you were exposed. They don't even you don't have to provide a bunch of documentation
Mhm.
or whatever. Yes, you were presumed, and that one little checkbox actually made the difference between me even having the option of using the veterans medical personnel versus my own private personnel. Just that one little bitty checkbox. Well, it'd been nice if they'd have checked that a long time ago, but the but anyway, Dave, I don't want I do think
Sure.
they're doing a lot better job, and I do think a lot of it has a lot to do with how you talked about how we just the appreciation, the respect for our service has improved, and I think that it has some influence, I'm sure, on people that are making those decisions and stuff. Uh, they're they're at least they're going to look at your records. They're going to and and they're usually, in all honesty, most of the stuff I found they responded in a fairly uh, reasonable time frame. So, yeah, I think they're doing better. I think it all gets back just to general improvement in attitude uh, and what we were all about. Because remember, in when I came back from overseas in '68, uh, man, it was not an advantage. Even trying to
Oh,
be hired, it was a disadvantage to be a veteran. One of the things that I think a lot of supervisors and managers had the attitude that uh, if if you had been in the military and had had some authority or whatever, that you wouldn't take orders or you wouldn't accept somebody being over you. Well, it's right the opposite. The ultimate team is uh, if is is the military. They build some of the greatest teams. They build teamwork to the point that people are willing to sacrifice their life for each other. Now,
Mhm.
you know, but a lot of managers, people that had never been in the service, really thought that we wouldn't know how to take orders. Well, that's what you do in the military is you take orders. and
Mhm.
uh, but it's been kind of interesting how it's all kind of evolved over a period of time, and I think part of it is things like what you're doing, just making people a little bit more
Mhm.
aware and stuff. And
I think some of the movies produced, like Good Morning Vietnam and some of the others, about as we take a look at respective today, looking at how we treated Vietnam veterans back in the day, I think America overall is ashamed of how we treated our Vietnam veterans. And I think we have softened our view and hopefully we've improved our position, i.e., in how we're dealing with compensation. But when you guys came back from Vietnam, uh, they were spitting on you and throwing all kinds of stuff on you, calling baby killers. That was a really rough time in America's history. But I think as we have, I want to use the word matured and taken a look back and said, you know what, we really didn't treat those guys well. And I think the nation overall is sorry for what we how we treated you, and is looking at, hey, they didn't deserve that, and they deserve so much more than they got. And I think America as a whole realizes that we screwed up and we shouldn't have treated you so disrespectfully and are trying to make amends now. And hopefully that has a bearing in the Veterans Administration, how they're treating the claims. And I think it does.
yeah, I agree with you. I think it does, but uh, kind of in a way, you talk about issues.
Mm-hmm.
This, of course, you're making an effort to acknowledge veterans and their service, and I'm uh, and we've talked about how the public is doing a better job generally. But I had mentioned before, some Vietnam veterans don't give other veterans uh, credit. There's some people look down on certain, some uh, Army guys, for example, may not necessarily appreciate the service and that and it's kind of a joke, but some guys actually take it for real. They say, well, the Air Force wasn't a real service, if you wasn't, uh, but we
You weren't having to sleep with your face in the mud.
yeah, and but now I've had a lot of uh, Marines and Army guys uh, thank me. They said we loved hearing them airplanes. We loved knowing that they was coming over. But uh, one of the things when you talk about credit, I'm not sure a lot of people are aware when it comes to things like the Vietnam Memorial,
Mm-hmm.
the wall. Do you realize that basically the Vietnam veterans did that, organized that, pushed that themselves? We had to, we had a big parade years and years ago, in Washington D.C. Well, that was, and they've had several since, but when they first did this and were first trying to get the Vietnam Memorial done, basically it was Vietnam veterans that was pushing it. We was pushing it for ourselves. We was trying to reward ourselves, and uh, but one of the things that bothers me just a little bit, I've run across several people recently
Go
that
ahead.
apologize to me.
Mm-hmm.
They say, "Well, I wasn't in combat. Yeah, I was in the army, but I was stationed in Seattle or I was uh, some other place. But they apologized for not being actually in combat or not being in Vietnam. Well, one thing I would like to make sure that there's a lot of veterans that appreciate what they did. If when it comes to supply chains, every war, hell, this thing with Iran and everything,
Mm-hmm.
logistics is everything. It's not just the guys on the ground. It's not just the guys in the planes. Can all it takes is one guy not doing his job well, leaving out a bolt, a loose nut, and it could cause a guy to lose his life. Can you imagine a guy that had to eject from his plane? He's been hit by a missile, and he's there's got to be a few seconds he's wondering if that parachute's going to work. You know, well, the guy that packed the parachute didn't have to endure the combat, but he made the difference between that guy living or dying. And what I want to encourage a lot of guys, it don't matter where you were, how you served. If you done your job and you done it well, you ought to wear your hats, wear your medals or ribbons, and wear them proudly. You contributed, you helped those guys, and I think, see, when we talk about respect, of course, sometimes that kind of is influenced by how other people view you and stuff. I had several years ago, uh, women would ask me, it was interesting, it was women that would ask more than once, ask me if I was in the service, if I was in Vietnam and stuff, and I'd said, I always just they would actually use this phrase, "Were you ever in danger?" Indicating
Okay.
if I was in danger, then my service was worth a lot more. They would have more appreciation for my service, and I
Okay.
usually would just say, "No, I was just in Thailand." You know, and of course, if you read my book, you know that there was some serious stuff going on in Thailand,
Oh yeah.
and that uh, was kind of interesting to me to have these women offering. If I would tell them I was on the ground in Vietnam, I was going to get much more appreciation, I guess, which I thought was kind of funny. But one of
There's the
the
book.
things, for example, it's not just Vietnam. I run across this one guy in Western Kentucky, and hey, you got it working.
Yeah, I had to turn off the blue or the green screen so you can see the book.
Okay.
But this is the book talking about Thailand. And one thing that really I'm really impressed with the book is the detail, day after day after day, flight numbers, pilot numbers, weapons and service officers. There's a lot of detail. If you want to know what's going to happen in Thailand, um, this is a great book to really look into that. You've got a tremendous amount of detail. And one of the things I absolutely love, like I said before, the fact that we don't want to forget anyone who flew a mission and never came home. They had a life, they had a future that they sacrificed for their country, and least we cannot forget. And I love efforts like this where we mention names, and because that person was a person, and he deserved to be remembered and respected for his duties. So thank you for going to all the effort to put this book in. And this book is what, like 300 pages or 469 pages. That's a
Yeah,
lot of
a
writing.
little lengthy. It's not one of those sit down and read in an afternoon. Uh, it's one of those things where you can read some of it and quit. It's divided up quite a bit in chapters that makes it easier to refer back to. And but one of the things um that I wanted to mention too, I think you had
Mhm.
asked me something about this at one point, but what the military service actually did for me, what the one thing that I got out of the military more than anything was not only some self respect, some self appreciation because of how some of them talked about me and felt about me,
Mhm.
but the one thing that I got out of it was appreciation for God and country. Now,
Okay.
all my life, and I was gone to church and stuff, but
Mhm.
when I was in the military, one of the first things that I did was go to churches, and and of course, usually there was a lot of other military people there, and uh, and when I was overseas in Thailand, if at all possible, every Sunday, I went to chapel, and
Mhm.
I even wrote about the one of the unique trips that I got to go on was because I was associated with the with the chapel. But uh, I can't imagine many people being involved in the military, being involved in a war, not having an appreciation for God. You know that, uh, but I have an appreciation for our country. Now I criticize people, individuals, and stuff, but I really, uh, I'm glad that I am a citizen of the United States of America, and and I respect that flag, the one that's behind you. Don't matter
Mhm.
where it's at, I see it. It makes a lot of difference to me, and I've always been proud to be associated with having been an, a, a veteran in the United States Air Force. So I think it had a real big appreciation. There was one other thing too. Now my mother and father, when I was born, and they both worked on the Manhattan Project and stuff.
Mhm.
A short time later, they they got divorced, and I was wound up being raised by my grandfather on his farm. The one thing that I got out of the military was a real sense of family. Now, I do believe, now I've worked for a lot of civilian agencies and corporations that preach teamwork, teamwork.
Mhm.
There's nobody teaches teamwork and develops teamwork as well as the military uh, does. And to me, I used to say that, family is the ultimate team. You know, family teams, they actually correct each other. They put pressure on each other. They look after each other, and they sacrifice for each other. But I had a sense of I guess, of family when I was in the military, and there was a few instances here and there that things was not quite as good, but I really did uh, feel like that the military had done more for me in some ways, and definitely did more for me than my father. Now, I always gave my father credit for the fact that I'm even here. I give God and my father and mother credit for me being born, but the, my father never done anything for me. He never raised me. He wasn't around or anything. Well, in the military, I had people that pretty much took me under their wing, if you want to put it that way. But the by the way, uh, I mentioned to you, you said you were at the NRA convention.
Sure.
Did
That
that
was just the other day.
did that turn out to be pretty good?
Yeah, the attendance was down compared to previous years. I think there was a couple of reasons for it. One of them was um, the hangup that's going at the airports now with not funding TSA, and people are concerned about making their connections and possibly, having travel plans disrupted. That may have had a reason for the decrease in attendance. But one of the reasons we love going to the NRA convention, we go there every year. Went there to Atlanta last year, this year in Houston, next year in Atlanta, is, and we've mentioned it before in some of the streamcasts that you'll see that on our posted on our platforms. You don't need to be afraid of the NRA, and you don't need to be afraid of NRA members like myself. They are the nicest, most generous, most caring, compassionate, family oriented. It's Americana at its best. Uh, they like they like firearms for defense. They like firearms for hunting, and they like firearms for sport. And they're not a people you need to be afraid of. And one of the things I firmly believe is that a free people are an armed people. So when you look at countries like North Korea, China, Russia, do those citizens own firearms? No. Why? The reason they don't Same thing in the Middle East, like Iran. Do Iranian citizens own firearms? No. Why? Because the government is afraid that they would overthrow an unjust, corrupt, and dictatorial government. So that is one reason why an armed people are a free people. And that's why I staunchly support the NRA and its mission. And we said time and time again, report after report, you don't have to be afraid of these people. They're not the bad guy. Same with law enforcement. Same with Customs and Border Patrol. In fact, there was a booth there. We did a report on Customs and Border Patrol. Couldn't interview anybody because they didn't have approval. But I did what's called a stand up, where I just gave an editorial opinion in front of their booth with their booth in the background saying ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, these guys and gals are simply enforcing U.S. law. They're law enforcement, and they're keeping America's borders secure, and we need to support and defend their mission. Now, one of the things you'll talk to like yourself and other military veterans and those currently serving, there's this family, there's this mission. They have a goal, they have a job, they have a duty to protect and defend the United States Constitution up to and giving their lives for this country. And I was just thinking a moment ago when you were talking, it's too bad. Now, this is going to offend some people. I'm going to say it anyway. It might not be a bad idea for compulsory uh, draft in the U.S. military. Now, before you throw something in the computer, let me tell you why I say that. Because I think the military does the best job of anybody out there in instilling honor, duty, community, sacrifice, caring about the guy in front of you. One of the things that the Army does a great job and the military does a great job in forming this teamwork bond, because in the battlefield, you depend on your buddy to support you and to get you to drag you out of a firefight. And one thing that's drilled into you at boot camp and beyond is that you rely on each other. It brings you really close together. And any military veteran you talk to, there's this familial family that they would give their life for. And we don't have that in America as a society, and it's sad. So that is the reason why I say compulsory military, like in Israel, you have to serve in the military. And I think if we did that, we would. Now, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to get angry. I'm going to get people angry, and they'll make. And so I'm just going to say it. There are some Americans that are spoiled brats. Okay, you don't realize just how good you have it here. You don't realize just how bad some other countries have, and would give anything, anything to come and live in the United States of America. And one of the things that the military teaches people is duty, honor, sacrifice, community, what that flag behind me means. And uh, we need to find that. And we need to find some way to instill that in our community today. So that's my editorial position.
Well, Dave, I had some very, very close friends. You made one of the things because you was always shipping out and relocating and everything. You made friends really fast in the military, and I had people that I really got uh, to be really close to from Boston, Massachusetts, from Portland, uh, Oregon. You know, from the San Francisco, even of all places. I had a year long friend that I met on the way over there, and we were together for the year and stuff. And I ran into him uh, uh, over and over. But one of the things too, I'm a life member of the uh,
NRA?
NRA, and I'm a life member of the Vietnam Veterans, and I'm a life member of the American Legion. I guess my attitude is, hey, if you're going to join, join. If you're going to be part of it, be part of it and support them and stuff. And by the way, I would like to remind people of the definition of veterans. Uh, Back in Roman times, people that were uh, that that were called veterans were the old ones. They were guys that had served in the Roman legions, the Roman army, and they were sitting on their porches watching the young guys marching out and stuff. Well, one of the things that I think we're probably doing a little better at, I think a lot of our veterans now support the young guys and support
Mhm.
the guys that's on active duty, and that we're not just watching. We really are trying to have your back. And I always found that interesting that the veteran was just known as the old ones that was watching the young ones go do their turn. That now I'm in agreement with you on this thing about drafting. One of the things
Mhm.
that used to bother me about during the Vietnam War, people, were going to Canada, avoiding the draft, and all this
Right.
kind of stuff. Well, I understood people that wanted to be conscientious objectors or whatever for good reason. But what bothered me, not a single one of them was willing to do community service at a retirement home or a veterans home or down at the courthouse. They weren't willing to do anything. Now, I understood they didn't want to go fight. They didn't want to be involved in the military, but they didn't want to do nothing for their country, for their community. Now and I've always thought that the Israel had the right idea. Everybody ought to
I
serve,
do too.
and so. But I appreciate you sharing that about uh, the National Rifle Association. But I would hope that we would do more and more of being a veteran means that we are not just watching the young guys go do their thing now, but that they're actually that we're willing to support them, and
Mhm.
and it's it's really Dave. I've thanked you before, but talking about supporting people, I appreciate you supporting the veterans and giving us a platform and having a positive attitude about it. I think, and for any veteran that's out there that's listening, I would encourage them to support you because it, you're supporting us. The least we can do is do the same thing back. And so, again, I can't thank you enough, and I appreciate it. I know I'm not a very uh, polished speaker as far as being able to make an organized presentation, but I really do appreciate you giving me a second chance here, and and, and I
We'll give you more than a second, Jen. We'll have you on again. See what
well,
you have. Well, you speak from your heart. As far as I served. I have. I've earned these stripes, so to speak, and this is why I did it. This is how we experienced it, and this is what's. This is why I support America, and this is why I support the military. The logo that I just threw up behind me is Operation Eagle's Wings. The website opeagleswings.com. I've done that for about a dozen years now, telling the story for and about veterans. It's part of USA Heartbeat, which is 501c3, which is classroomusa.net, Operation Eagle's Wings, Light America Blue, honoring law enforcement. We've done some of these for about 10 years now. And the reason is because, and we started Light America Blue after the George Floyd incident because if we want to be a nation of freedom, if we want to be a nation of law and order, we need to support those who ensure that law and order is followed, or else we will devolve into an anarchical society. We have to have the Constitution, we have to have law and order. We need to honor and respect those who go out every day, put on the badge and the uniform, put their lives on the line to try to keep a lid on America and try to keep us following the law. Now, one of the things I'm going to share this. I'm going to stand up for a little bit.
oh yeah, did
So what I do is I have my wife is gracious enough to buy me like 10 different shirts, all with an American flag theme. So I'll walk through a restaurant, I'll walk through a Walmart on purpose with this wearing the flag, because I want to see what response I get. And in the last few years, I'm kind of disappointed that some people look at me with kind of like a downcast look or disgust, thinking I'm MAGA or a Trump supporter. No, I'm an American supporter. And I'm proud of this flag, and I honor and defend those people who went out and support, like yourself, that supported our country. And I'll continue to wear this flag. And what I'm encouraging people is to talk to somebody who came from Venezuela, talk to somebody who lived in Cuba, and I will never forget what one person said in the last general election at a presidential debate, saying, "You people in America got to get this thing figured out. Because if we can't come to America, where are we going to go in the world? You are the
Exactly.
gold standard. You are the Statue of Liberty. You are freedom personified. You are the nation with a Lady Liberty in the harbor holding your torch up. And this is freedom. This is America, and it's synonymous. That's what the world thinks of us. I know some people don't like us, but I think a lot of people do. So we need to continue to be the gold standard for freedom, liberty, and justice for all. And I have no problem in getting on the soapbox and preaching and telling about why I love this great country. And we will always do that here at Street Level America and USA Heartbeat. And sometimes we're cheerleaders, but it's like, hey, guys and gals, go talk to somebody. I have that have been in Venezuela, Cuba, and they will say, guys, you got to figure this out because you cannot devolve into a Venezuela. You cannot devolve into a North Korea. You cannot devolve. I don't want to get political here because this is some of this is going to be a platform we can't get political. But when you bring socialism and communism into America, and you elect people like Mandami in New York City that are bringing socialist views into America, I believe that's directly contradictory to the theme, to the goal of what America is. And editorially speaking, I don't agree with socialism, communism. These people like James that we're talking to right now, they went to war to defend us against socialism and communism, and we're voting it into office.
You know, I really think that
Come
uh,
on, man.
it anybody that's got any common sense, these people know for even though uh, they're protesting for Palestine or against Israel or whatever, when if you notice though, they're not willing to go over there. They're if they That's one of the things that bothers me is that they think
Mm-hmm.
that you can't if it's so bad here, why why are people breaking in to try to get in here? Why aren't they trying to break in to Russia or China or whatever? It's really kind of sad because I know that the people that's even doing some of the protesting right now, they know they don't want to go over there. They don't. There's no way that they want to live like those people live, and stuff. But I, I'm for you. Your attitude about I'm a patriot, and I don't uh, uh, try to give other people a real hard time about it. But if they really feel that way, I wish they would leave. I'd even take out some of my retirement and buy them a ticket or two.
I'll take you to the bus station or the
Yeah.
airport.
But in anyway, is there anything else, Dave, that you want us to?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, I want to share this with you. Let me turn off the blue screen again so you can see the book. I
Okay.
found this book, Paul Johnson,
Yeah.
History of the American People, and uh, it was marked down to 75 cents.
You're kidding. Boy, that's cheap. Because,
But I found it in the garbage can at
oh,
a
you're
local
kidding.
bookstore at McKay Books. It was in the garbage can because nobody would buy it. And this is the history of the American people. And I thought, I think, or did I pay 75 cents for it? I can't remember. So I do dumpster diving at the bookstore. But why? The same reason I wear the shirt. What are people throwing away? What are people losing respect for? Now, the next question is this: what's the next chapter of this book look like? History of the American people. Every day we get up, every day we go to work, every day we vote an election. Virginia just voted an election right now. We're not going to talk about it, but they approved the redistricting, redrawing the boundaries, which we're going to editorially talk about that on some of our platforms to give more of a heads up to the allow more Democratic representation in Congress. So, as we every day do our thing, we're writing a new chapter in this book, History
Hmm.
of the American People. What's the next chapter going to say? Are we going to have an America? Are we going to have like this woman from, I think it was South America she was from? You guys need to figure this out because if we can't come here, where are we going to go? So America is the gold standard. One other thing I want to talk to before we leave is, and I have my opinion on it. This war in Iran, if it's okay if we talk about it. My position is this: I've talked to a lot of people that have ministries over in Iran. They say the Christian churches, the underground Christian church in Iran, is exploding. So I have no problem with the people of Iran. I pray for them every day. But the IRC, the Iranian Republican Guard, the dictatorial people that are killing thousands of their own people to stay in power, this regime has to be stopped. And yes, I'll say the word regime change. And I think we need to be over there. I support President Trump and what he's doing because we've got to break the back of the dictators in control of Iran. They are the world leading sponsor of terrorism. If we don't, we're going to have 9/11 version 2 on American soil because they've been shouting death to America for 47 years, and they mean every word of it. And I've talked to some veterans who say, Dave, I don't agree with you. We shouldn't be in a forever war. One of the things I do like about Donald Trump is he uses other things other than military action to negotiate, to mitigate, to coerce, to force, to say, hey, you don't do this, and we're going to bomb your bridges. It'll be power plant and bridge day. So quit shooting thousands of your own people. Quit shouting death to America. If you are a um, good neighbor to the rest of the world, you got nothing to fear from the United States of America. But if you start killing 20,000 of your own people and keep screaming death to America and death to Israel, and you're the great Satan, there's going to be an F 16 coming your way. And you're not going to like the mail payload that it drops. And that's a hard position for me, a pastor, to take. But one of the problems we have is if we don't deal with countries like that, we will have World War II revisited. Remember back in World War II, England said, America, please get involved. America said, no, 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 we don't want to get involved. Not our monkey, not our circus. But we eventually got sucked into it. I think the same situation is Iran. We, and I like the fact that Donald Trump uses everything he can. He will extend deadlines. He will say, hey, folks, but he has this hammer saying, you don't play ball. If you continue to lie to America and the world, there's going to be a payload coming your way and it's going to take you out. So, and some people don't agree with that. Maybe, James, you don't either. And I know veterans don't like seeing our brothers and sisters possibly with boots on the ground in Iran. But if we don't, they've been screaming death to America for 47 years. Why? Because they mean it. They mean every word of it. So we have to deal with it, and we have to deal with it now. What's your position? What do you think? If you even want to even have an opinion on it.
Well, and no, I'm for uh, stopping everything that they're doing. One of the things that bothers me, I thought Trump was a genius when he started several years ago. He decided that one of the ways to handle anybody is economically hit them in the pocketbook and everything. Well, the tariffs and everything we was doing really, really good. It really was having an effect. Everybody was willing to make a deal, willing to negotiate. And then our own Supreme Court told him he couldn't do it. And I'm thinking, that's the most humane way to deal with anybody is economically. There's no bombs, no nothing. They won't let him do it the easy way, you know. But I thought that was really good. Now
I
I'm
agree.
I realize at some point somebody at some point may have to be on the ground, but I still think that it can be somewhat limited. It uh, just it really needs to be more surgical, more uh, very key uh, points. You know, I personally still wondering why they don't take that point there at the Strait of Hormuz. You know, go ahead and take those guys. You know, put
Yeah.
if you had to put somebody on the ground at that one point, you know, a special operations kind of thing is not the same thing. Yeah, they're on the ground, but it's not the same thing as what we did in Vietnam, 10 years unlimited, just on and on. But yet we put unlimited people on the ground in the skies in Vietnam, but we put unbelievable restrictions on them.
Oh yeah.
We tied both hands behind their backs and told them, now go ahead and fly. You know, I don't want to take up a bunch of time,
No,
but
go ahead. I was going to give you an example if you
well,
didn't. You had to
for
fly a corridor. There was a specific corridor you had to fly in every combat mission. And you're like running the gauntlet. And the enemy knew exactly where to send the missiles because you had to fly that corridor so you didn't fly over another country, make somebody mad. And we put our airmen, we put the Air Force in Vietnam under such severe, stupid restrictions that it was unconscionable, I think.
well, for example, we used to have these bombing halts, and while we was having the bombing halt, the North Vietnamese were bringing in more surface to air missiles, and they were relocating those surface to air missiles to different locations where we didn't know where they were. So when our guys had fly back when we restarted, then we had a much rougher time. But this was kind of now Colonel Oles. If you ever read much about him, he
Heard
was in
about him.
disagreement with the way we were doing it. He came up with the most successful air mission ever in the Vietnam War because he fooled them. He even fooled our own politicians, even some of our generals, and it cost him. He retired with 1 star instead of 4 because of his. Uh, but now he was a patriot. He took care of his men and stuff. But he did. It was the way that for example, they wouldn't let us win. And when we almost won anyway, you know, after the Tet Offensive, then they called a halt to it. And and that, but one of the things we had to ask for permission before we could bomb a surface to air missile site that was shooting at our guys. Before they could bomb them, well, first of all, they had to, going in, they had to fly over them going into North Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when so they had to save their bombs for their primary mission. But if for
Sure.
some reason, because of weather or whatever, they had bombs left over, coming back out, they would call the airborne commander and ask for permission to drop that unused bomb on that SAM site. Do you know
Right.
what their answer was most of the time? You already
What?
know that
Yeah.
no, you can't do it. So they'd come back, and at the end of our runway, we had a bomb dump. We dropped the bomb because they couldn't land with a live bomb. They would drop the bomb on a useless piece of land, and but it's just stupid rules like that. I mean, if you're going to fight, fight. But if you're not, but just to sacrifice people, and that was one of the kind of things.
Wow.
And that's the reason you know, I think most people, first of all, almost nobody wants to keep. I don't know. Everybody's got a short-term memory or whatever. But if you go back 47 years, when the Shah of Iran that I got to see got kicked
Mhm.
out,
Sure.
and you start adding up all the times that Iran or one of their proxies, whether that they were funding, hit the United States. They hit one of our destroyers and kill some guys and stuff. Or in the Beirut barracks, what was it?
Mhm.
200 Marines died, and
Oh, huge amount.
but it wasn't just one or two of these things. This has been going on, and they's getting, you know, onesies and twosies and a dozen here and 100 there, but they've been hitting us and hurting us for years and years, and we've actually basically in some ways encouraged them. You was talking about guys being brats. Well, these countries kind of act like spoiled brats in a lot of cases. You know, I always believed in consequences. You know, I really believe that makes a difference, and that's the reason I think that every time Iran steps out of line, then slap them back down. You know, if that's what they want, if they don't, if they're not smart enough to to make a deal and stick with it. Of course, I really don't believe. I don't trust these people. We've had 47 years to prove that they're not trustworthy. Uh, I would like to see somebody manage to get in charge, but like you said, how are they going to do it? They have no weapons, and everybody wants to. I'm with the IRA about the weapons. The IRA, the NRA. I'll say it right.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, the IRA. uh, but anyway, I appreciate you attending the NRA convention and stuff. I was real curious how it was going, and stuff. I support them. Like I said, I'm a life member. I'm a life member of both the veterans organizations, and I, I, I'm willing to commit myself. Just join for a year or two and quit. That's not any good,
I'll
But
I'll say something about the NRA. There's been some controversy over leadership, and there's been a leadership change. I'm sure some of the decrease in attendance was because they didn't like what previous leadership of the NRA was doing. And somebody came up to me as I was charging my batteries on my camera, said, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "Here's the deal. We've got to make it more than personalities. We got to make it more than I hate Trump, I love Trump. We got to make it about American and American values and the Second Amendment. So if you don't like the leadership of the NRA, change the leadership, but don't lose focus of the goal. The goal is this: it's the Second Amendment. It is a armed people are a free people. So I don't care. I support the current leadership of the NRA. I support the mission of the NRA, and I'm not going to get sidetracked into these political, um, mudslinging sessions where, oh, I don't like him, so I'm not going to support this organization. One of the problems we have in conservative circles in America today is maybe you don't like Trump, but he's our commander in chief. We need to support him. We need to support American and American values. NRA. We need to support the NRA because they support the Second Amendment. You want to lose your freedom, lose your firearms, and you'll lose your freedom. So we were there this year. We were there last year. We'll be there in Atlanta next year, and we'll be there in following years supporting the mission of the NRA. Now, there's other organizations other than NRA, Gun Owners of America (GOA), but I don't know about you, but I love history. I love um, American history. The NRA is part of Americana and part of the history. And my plaque is I've got a membership card here that says I'm a member of the NRA, and I will be a member of the NRA for as long as I'm here.
well, that's the way I feel about it. Just make me a life member. You know, if I'm going to support you, I'm going to support you. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. But one of the things I hope that when people read my books and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and especially like the new book, uh, uh,
There's this one.
yeah, now let me show you my other one again. That
Okay.
the always takes me a minute to figure out how to do that. but the James Roy Roberson, you know, created in 1945 and born 1946. Uh, Part of it, uh, if it tells how I got to be me,
Mm-hmm.
and me is a proud Vietnam veteran. And
Mm-hmm.
and if people are kind of curious, you might want to read that. If you're just interested in the military part, then it's all divided up there. Makes it pretty easy to identify those 5 chapters. It's the Air Force only. But if
Now, another reason why people might want to read this book is, let's say you have a relative that served in Vietnam. Let's say, let's say he's a grumpy old Gus, and let's say he doesn't want to talk about it. Let's say he's got this bad attitude, and you're wondering, why does he think that way? You might want to buy one of these James Robertson's books, read what they had to go through, and it might help you understand your great grandfather, your uncle, a little bit more if you knew where he came from. So on that reason, I'd recommend you buy this book or buy one of
uh,
them.
one thing I'd like to share this other little anecdote. My wife's youngest brother was same age as me. He was a Marine and he was in Vietnam, on the ground in Vietnam. And anyway, he had had some bad experiences in in boot camp and the way he was treated and stuff. And he my wife told me that he would never talk about it. He didn't like his service in the Marines. He really was down on them. Well, what I did, I bought him a Vietnam veteran cap with U.S. Marine Corps Vietnam veteran on it, and I gave
Hoorah.
it to him. And guess what? He wore that back and forth to work every day of his life. Now, he died at 58 years old, bless his soul. But uh, and every year in Western Kentucky there and Benton, they have a parade. It's called a Tater Day Parade, but it's a pretty big deal for them. Well, they have this parade. He had 3 Corvettes, antique
Mhm.
Corvettes.
Right.
Well, he would drive that Corvette with the top down and with his veteran's cap on every parade. And she couldn't believe it. He said he he hated the Marines, he hated his Vietnam service. And I said, yeah, he may have hated some of it, but he's still glad he done it. He's still proud. He still wants people to know, and he did. He he had that in his truck to and from work every day. And so some of the guys that sound grumpy and
Mhm.
stuff, uh, down deep, they're still glad they'd done it. They just need to be approached in the right way. And I never done nothing. I never talked to him about it. I just bought him the cap and gave it to him, and he slapped it on his head and pretty much didn't take it off. And they, but there was one other guy. He was World War II, and I
Mhm.
met him, and he was retired, and he had he was real. He'd been a Navy corpsman, and he was
Mhm.
stationed in Burma at a hospital in Burma. And he would tell you real quick. He said, "But I wasn't in combat. I wasn't in combat." I said, "Really? What happened every day?" Because I'm like you. I read history and stuff. I said,
Mhm.
"What happened at that uh, medical facility uh, every day?" He said, "Well, there was the one Japanese pilot that came over because we weren't really defended, and he would come over and drop one bomb, and we wouldn't know where it was going to hit, but it hit something or somebody every single day." I said, "It sounded to me like you were a little bit in combat. If you're having a bomb dropped on you every single day," and 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 what I did is I got him World War II veterans cap, and the Pacific has a little different ribbon than the European theater, and I got him the correct one, and and took it and gave it to him. Had it had his had him make a picture with me with it, and it meant he wore that cap all the time. He thought that he wanted everybody to know that yes, but that's what I wanted to make sure of this time. I said before, it didn't matter who you were, where you served, and stuff, but I really want to emphasize that and underline that if you did your job, you're appreciated, and at least I appreciate you, and
Mhm.
and and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one, but yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of this stuff that's going on, uh, uh, it really bothers me, and but it it's really it's tough situation because we have family members
Mhm.
that you can't express uh, your opinion. Uh, even if you don't even have to say it out loud. If they suspect how you feel about it, you know, it's it's very disappointing. I don't know where they come. Well, I do know. I think it gets into our school systems and stuff.
Oh yeah,
We're
very much so.
indoctrinating people. I I I sent both of my boys to college, but I'm convinced that in some ways it was the worst thing that I ever did because they indoctrinated them. And they really uh, it it they weren't just settling on teaching them their particular curriculum that they needed to teach them. But anyway, Dave, I think you're doing the right thing, trying to that at least I think in a lot of ways if you can make people appreciate the veteran, then they're probably going to appreciate their country. But if
Amen.
you
So
know, if
one of our future plans, for example, is we want to do a live show from the Arizona Memorial in Hawaii. We want to go boots on the ground to specific locations across the country, really touching and feeling and talking to the curator, whatever exhibit we're at, talking about, and then having Zoom sessions where people from all over America can call in and ask questions about wherever we're at. And one of the goals we want to do is go to the Arizona Memorial and share with people what exactly that represents. Um, honor, duty, sacrifice. The 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, which got us drug us into World War II. We can't remember, we cannot forget these things that are so crucial and focal point of what built America's character and what built America's strength and resilience and mission focus on freedom, liberty, and justice for all. So
well,
just throw that
Dave,
out there. That's part of our goal going forward is to go to travel across America and to visit sites like that.
well, you do realize, I know you realize, but a lot of people don't realize that doing what you do, doing what you and I are doing right now, you can't do that in very many countries, even in Europe, even in England. You can't do that kind of thing. You can't talk and express an opinion on anything. Uh, I don't think very many people understand how few places you can actually do what we do. You know, we've got a good deal here, and
Mm-hmm.
we really don't want to screw it up.
No, we
That's
don't.
the way I.
In Iran, they hung a national teenage soccer star because he dared to speak out against the current regime.
Yeah, that isn't that amazing?
That wasn't in the 50s or 60s. That was this year.
I know, and but it anyway. I do think that every once in a while I feel like we're kind of gaining ground. It's very slow, but I feel like a lot of the stuff that's happened to us in the past few years, it'll take us 50 years to correct some of that. It's not going to happen overnight. It's you're it has like I said, you're talking about kids in school and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to wait till they have been trained correctly and understand uh, and and then they grow up and they're able to express their opinion or be in charge or cast a vote or whatever. But anyway, it's been interesting again, Dave, and I
Well, we'll
think
have you back again because there's a lot to talk about, and I really value your history and what you bring to the table and to the discussion about veterans, um, Thailand, and just what it's like to serve America.
well, I thank you and I appreciate you, Dave.
We'll be talking again, and we appreciate it. This is Classroom USA, Street Level America, Operation Eagle's Wings, and probably some other platforms that I have not yet mentioned that we'll post this video on. Again, check out the book. It is Buck Sergeant Roberson, Thailand 1967, 1968. And you saw the video or the picture of the book. You can buy those on eBay and other places you buy books.
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com is a good place to buy it. So, we love America. Let's work together to keep America as the greatest nation on the planet. Remember to vote. Remember to honor the sacrifice of those great men and women who gave their lives so that we can vote, so that we have the freedom of speech and the Second Amendment and all the other amendments of the U.S. Constitution. This is America now and forever. Let's keep it. James, have a good evening and thank you for being with us tonight.
Good night and thank you.
God bless America.
I agree.